career. So the next guy that I want to talk about is Christian Gonzalez from Oregon, 6'1", 197, 32-inch arms. You know, he ran a 4.38 at the combine. These are some explosive numbers, right? 41.5-inch vert, 11 feet 1 inch on the broad jump. The whole class to me is pretty athletic, but this guy is a ball player. He's played over 1,900 snaps. He only missed 5% of his tackles last year, and all 4 of his interceptions came last year, which is kind of interesting, right? As far as, production in the secondary, getting your hands on footballs. He did finish very strong at Oregon. What do you see when you see Christian Gonzalez?
Yeah, as you mentioned, being at Colorado, where my second home is, it's truly my best getaway in my life. I love it out there. So I have such a soft spot for the Buffs, and I'm like, why would anyone leave there? And I understand why he left, because because of the coach, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, look, Christian Gonzalez. The way that I look at him, again, he completely has me thinking AJ Terrell. And I know I don't mean to hang with AJ Terrell that much, but as AJ is one of the top, I think, 5 in the league right now, just got that size, the 6'1" size, 190, whatever it may be, 95, 96, 93, speed, what's he, a 4.38? He's a very fluid mover, right? Not only is he fluid, he has the ability to explode out of his cuts. So he's got that package that we're obviously looking for. I said this in our mock draft the other day with Marcus, right? We were talking about it, and I said, I would love more than anything for the Atlanta Falcons to pull off, Gonzalez in at the 8th overall pick, and then go tandem with AJ Terrell, because I think these two guys with maybe at 3rd on their guy they just picked up from Detroit. I think, maybe that's a good work. I think this guy, again, ball skills, everything about him is, to me, what you're looking for prototypically at a corner spot. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, there might be someone out there that say Gonzalez over Spoon because of that, just that extra couple inches, right? And that may be something they're looking for. He's full on class. Both of these guys are, of course, right? They're guys that you want in your program. And look, I really, really like him. I like watching him, and I'm excited about where he's going. Yeah, Boulder to Eugene, Quinn.
That's our Quinn McLean, one of our great data scientists here, responsible for a lot of our great modeling. Also, watching the Sumer Sports Show. By the way, you mentioned Marcus Whitman. We were both on his podcast on Thursday doing a mock draft. I thought it was really fun. I thought you had a pretty cool pick with Hendon Hooker at 23 for the Vikings, because you couldn't trade out. We are getting people who are coming over from that channel. I don't know if Derek has come over from this channel, but he says, Falcons fan here. Thank you, TD, for some great winning seasons in Atlanta. And that was, we really appreciate Marcus for having us on, because it has helped us grow this our audience a little bit. So we really do appreciate this. SH991, hello. I enjoyed the mock draft. So we're really happy with how that turned out. No, I think, look, like, it probably is a styles makes fights thing here. Or do you think, like, so you basically said that these two guys are very good, very similar. It makes sense that they're close. If from what I'm catching, you're saying that if style had nothing to do with it, then Witherspoon is probably a little bit higher in your rankings, but you could see a team that prizes length looking at Gonzalez more, which I think makes perfect sense, right? Like, some of these defenses, you need long arms to be successful in, and some of them, it's a little bit agnostic to that.
Yeah, I would say the ability to do what he can do, and he can come up and press. And I mean, I'm talking about Gonzalez, and you're right. They're not similar. Again, remember what I said the other day. I don't normally like comparing people that are a couple inches different, because they are a couple inches different, right? We're talking about 5'11", talking about 6'1". Look, I mean, they're similar in certain ways, but I when I look at Witherspoon, I look at his explosiveness to his movement, and Gonzalez has some of it, of course. He's a smoother, longer guy, right? So there is a different stylistically, and I love Witherspoon's aggressiveness, but Gonzalez has it as well. He'll come up, make plays on balls. He's not holding back. He'll make, like you said, he's making tackles. He is consistent. To me, both of these guys are very consistent. Gonzalez probably has a little bit more consistency to him, all things considered, right? So it's going to be an interesting play. And you said the difference on in the odds were what to go?
Yeah, so basically, what Witherspoon's minus 200. So, that one you basically it's, to do the math in your head when it's a negative, you just take minus 200 divided by 300. So that would be, 66.7. So, that's kind of the odds you need to bet him. Christian Gonzalez plus 150. For that one, you do 100 divided by 250, which is 40. So you basically have, a 40% chance there. So again, like that's kind of where it is. And now the book takes the over round. But those are the two main guys. So Witherspoon, you can think about more like 62%. Christian Gonzalez, more like 38% after you sort of work that out. So that it's very close, right, Thomas? To your point, like you're more of a very much in what is considered a coin flip here to be the first player taken. And then when you look at the sixth overall pick, Witherspoon is the favorite, but Gonzalez is not that far behind, right? Like that's one where you're not talking about it being plus 350. If you look at that, you're looking at basically 22% you would need to make a bet or better on Gonzalez being the sixth overall pick, which is not terribly long odds to your point. Now, very interesting, Thomas. You talked about Okudah. Does Okudah fall into that situation where maybe nothing bad happened? He had an injury and stuff, but Okudah kind of reminds me of a player where we overrated his tackling, we overrated his toughness, and we didn't necessarily get down to what you're talking about, which was his cover ability. Like in pure cover ability, that's got to be the one thing you look at. And Okudah had all these intangibles, right? But now it feels like the cover ability really hurt him. And he's going to go to the Falcons here. If the Falcons take a corner first, he can sort of slide into more of a slot role, more of maybe a safety role, more of maybe a guy who is as a force player, as you said, versus something that he maybe can't be, which is a cover guy.
Look, in the end, everything we're talking about here, you have to finish the play. You could look good. I remember we had Chris Houston, and he was drafted by the previous regime when he came, when I got to Atlanta. We ended up trading him to Detroit, to Martin Mayhew, by the way, when we did it. But he looks so good, moving around, staying in phase, right on everyone's hip, always there, but never made a play on the ball. Never. I'm being exaggerative. I don't like that normally. But he was very inconsistent. You have to make plays on the balls. You have to finish. You can look good doing all of this, but if you don't, then you definitely lose. Before you know it, you're not starting for your team. So when you look at Okudah, and yeah, he had a lot of positives to him, right, on a lot of levels. But pure cover skills has always been something that, and especially while he's been in the pros, right? I know he's had his injury, of course. It's been tough for him. They bring him here to Atlanta. Personally, I think I know there's going to be people out there saying, no, we need a pass rusher, and they do, although. What do they have? They have three guys they just brought in, 3 30-year-old pluses, right?
Calais Campbell, the guy from
David
Onyemata from New Orleans. And those two guys are the ones I remember. But and then they have Grady in there too.
Bud Dupree they just brought in, right?
Bud Dupree, that's right. Bud Dupree, a good example of a guy who was signed because of his sacks and not because of his pressure rate. So I think the Falcons are buying a little bit low there, which is good for them.
But think about this. So they're there and they're thinking, and I remember this. Remember, everyone, you go into the draft and you're saying, all right, we got the draft and we got free agency. What can we do in free agency? They had a lot of money, 60 million plus, right? What can we do in free agency that will allow us to do what we want to do in the draft, which is that much more precarious? You never know what's going to be there. You know how you can manage your money. Let's get the sure bets, at least, per the money and what we're looking for. And maybe it's very tough to pull a corner in free agency. Yep. Let's save the corner for free agency, potentially. And they might be sitting there at Gonzalez. Who knows? Be tough. I don't know if Gonzalez gets by the Raiders or, at that 6-7. I don't know. But
you have to. I think the quarterbacks, Thomas, are a really wild card, right? If the first 4 guys go high, then they're going to be able to get one of those 2 guys in theory, right? If a quarterback falls, I think that they're also going to be in a decent spot too, because maybe the Raiders take the last quarterback or something like that at 7, and they're able to sort of get one of those. Because I don't think a team as we see in the markets, a team might not pass up CJ Stroud at 2 for a corner, but they might Will Anderson, and so that would help, of course, the Falcons kind of get their guy because I think that that's kind of the way it shapes out. If it goes kind of as expected with the last quarterback trailing off, it could help the Falcons. If all four quarterbacks go first, it could also help the Falcons. But maybe not as much, because then the Raiders might be open to getting a defensive back, considering how much they have a need at that position.
Right. No, look, it'll be interesting to see how they play out. And I know we're going to move on to the next guy here, so I'll let you roll that way. But everything you say, I love our conversation on those two guys, because, again, they're going to be difference makers in the league.
Yep.
And the teams that end up taking them are these two do not have, to me, there's always, it feels like there's always that corner matchup at the top of the draft where one is significantly more attractive, or there are elements to some of the other side of the coin where you're like, no way I'd take that guy because he's a complete character flaw guy, or he doesn't, he's really not good at this, or he doesn't have a really good understanding of the game, or whatever it is. To me, these top 3 and 4 guys that we're talking about today don't have any of that element, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing that stands out in my mind that is like really off-putting. So I think that's a real positive for the group.
Yeah, there are always these like pairs, right? The year that Patrick Surtain was the best guy in the draft, J.C. Horn went to Carolina because of, preferences, right? And like, to your point, like both of those guys are good corners. In your year, I think everybody mocked Terrell first before Henderson. Now this was second and third because Okudah went third, but like those two guys, everybody kind of were like, well, Terrell's more well-rounded, but CJ Henderson's like, this. And so then the Jaguars went with Henderson as opposed to Terrell. And that was kind of a whiff, and it was, and not, but Henderson has reasons, but like there are always these like battles between corners in the draft, because it really is what the team wants as far as the movement in the guy.
That was just so everyone knows, like that was a huge discussion, right? What you had often, and my good friend drafted him at Jacksonville, Dave Caldwell. I mean, CJ Henderson with his speed was unbelievable, right? I mean, it was beyond, you were like, wow, look at this close. You get really enamored with that at times. And yet there were other things that were a concern of his, and we could go into that another time. And it reared its head, unfortunately, for Dave and for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think Dave is one of the best evaluators out there in football. Caldwell is. It was just one of those choices for the organization that was tough, right? Because there were more elements to it. And sometimes what you all don't see, on the fan base side or on the, sort of analytics study side, is what we don't talk about and we can't talk about, right? Some of the issues, the character issues and elements that are really difficult when people are like, I can't believe those people didn't go after that guy. What are they thinking? And usually there's a reason that way that people put, they're what sometimes is called skull and crossbones on a player, because it may be like, no. Or what we call in analytics now, I'm being a lot more proper, is assumptions, right? Our assumption is we're not taking this guy until the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round because of something. And what all I'd say in the end was our scouting staff and our coaching staff were at loggerheads, at Atlanta on this early on. And then we got everyone worked in the same direction, and we thought AJ Terrell was a guy to take. So
yeah, for sure. And to your point, like people on the outside, it's actually easy to find, like, so Quay Walker was the big one last year where I found out Quay Walker was getting drafted in the 1st round. And so like I go and I'm like trying to figure out, and I even went to my old boss, Chris Collinsworth. I'm like, hey, let's watch Quay Walker. He comes out, he's like, oh yeah, this is a 1st round pick, big, long. Like it's easy to infer the positives and why a guy might go earlier than everybody believes. It's almost impossible to find the negatives without that inside information. But it's very interesting. I've said it a million times on the show. It's like, why did you not take this guy my models really liked? And you're like, well, because a lot of times it's just like, I talked to the guy once and he didn't pick up anything. And like, that's a red flag, but it's also injuries and all that kind of stuff that can really go against a player. I will say this, when Henderson was up for a trade, I had multiple clubs say, hey, reach out to me and say, what would you price CJ Henderson as? Right. And so even, it's sort of crazy, but even after he soured in Jacksonville, these guys still want to take a bite out of the guy that they had, drafted, they want to buy low on a guy that they always loved going into the draft. So that, that was something that was interesting as well. Just because his market ended up not being that big. So